Well, we spoke a little bit in the last example about how to win one positions. Now we flip the coin and we come to what you should do in losing positions. And I don't mean positions which are holdable, I mean lost positions. Now there's no real secret to the way to play in hopeless positions. You've just got to complicate the game and hope that the opponent goes wrong. There's really nothing else you can do. You've got to try and look for every last tactical resource possible at your disposal. Above all, you shouldn't give up. It's the same sort of thing that we discussed about one positions. You know, people have a tendency to relax when the game is won. They've done all the hard work, or so they think, and then they just sit back in their chair and blow it. Well, something like that could happen to you in a game, you know, when you're on the other side of the coin. You know, you might be the lucky recipient of somebody who sits back in their chair and thinks the game can win itself. So you've really got to put as many obstacles in the way of the win as is possible, and usually the way to do this is through tactics. Now, just to show you what can happen in a situation like this, we come to an interesting game from the Detroit Open, played in 1992, between two American players, an ex-Russian player and an American player called William Fuller playing with white, and international master Leonid Bassin playing with black. The opening is a Dutch defence, where black resolutely refrains from developing that knight on f6 early. The line with bishop g5, the line that white's played, is really designed to mess up black's pawns. So if we just drop black one move, for instance, if black was willing to play ball here and develop his knight to f6, then I dare say white would simply have taken that knight off. And white's hoping that the double pawns will give him some sort of an advantage. So Bassin plays the game, plays this variation very cannily, and he kind of hangs this bishop out to dry on g5. Note also, the queen is attacking b2 in this position. I quite like the way black handles this line in this particular game, and he makes the bishop on g5 look rather silly. So black continues to develop the pieces. White brings out his pieces. Of course, this is a level position. You know, black's got a strong position in the centre, but there's nothing wrong with what white is doing per se. I mean, you know, white has a fine game. It's just that he hasn't got any advantage. And now black develops his knight to f6. Well, of course, it would make no sense now for white to surrender that bishop on f6, because black would simply take back with the knight. The usual logic of these lines of bishop g5 goes that, you know, you shouldn't really surrender this bishop if there's no real reason to do so. So therefore, in the game, white just continues to develop the pieces, and we can't argue with that. Alright, castles, but of course the impression remains that white has no real advantage due to black's strong hold in the centre. And we're kind of waiting for black in a position like this to play knight e4. That's what I would be doing if I was white. Well, now white needs a pawn break to open up this game. A pawn break is a way of levering opening the game using your pawns. I can see two realistic ways for white to try to do this. The first of which is played in the game, the move b4. White can try to get to grips with black's position via the move b5. Or the other way, just dropping back, is slightly slower, but involves moving this knight on c3 to e2, and then to go c4. That is another way of getting this position open for white's pieces. But even if white were able to do that, then, you know, I'm pretty sure black would have a very reasonable game. And one way he could ensure himself of a good game is plonking this knight in on e4. Anyway, white decides that he should take some action. Goes b4. Black castles. White goes knight a4. Black retreats. White brings his knight to c5, which attacks the pawn on e6. And now black plays a characteristic move in the Dutch, queen to e8. The queen's done some miles already in this game. The queen not only protects the pawn on e6 in this position, but she also maybe threatens to come out to the king side at some point. That's a traditional manoeuvre in the Dutch. Well, he certainly does gain a king side attack in this game. In comes the knight. We could have expected that. That knight is really the linchpin of black's assault on the white king. And now white decides that with the threat of knight c3 looming, which would fork the queen and rook, it's time to remove that knight. But of course, when he does so, he gives up this very valuable light squared bishop. I imagine at this point white was thinking probably of a draw. He's much lower rated than his opponent. His opponent is an esteemed international master. Black seems to be getting an attack on the king side together. So white just exchanges off the pieces and steers the game towards a draw. That knight on e5 looks strong. Obviously black could take it off but then there'd be opposite colour bishops on the board. I don't think black could really hope to win a position like this if he chopped the knight off. It's not really likely. I don't see any way for black to really entertain any realistic hopes of winning this position, but white is, of course, exactly the same boat. So Basin goes rook f5, and I think that's a good move. Now he threatens to take off the knight, winning a pawn. Bishop comes back, queen up to e7, and now this pawn break c4. So eventually Fuller did get this move in. But nevertheless, the impression is that black has slightly better chances in this position. Mainly because he's attacking the king. White is pressing forward on the queen side, but it's hard to find a target there for white to aim at. And black is already threatening a move like h4, winning that bishop, because if bishop f4, then we go g5. Bishop's gone. So white has to play a move he doesn't want to make here, and he's slipping into a bad position. It's funny in games, you know, sometimes you slip into a bad position and you really can't figure out why. Maybe white's whole game plan, once he started chopping off those pieces, was not really the best. And his next move is certainly quite bad. a5. I mean, whatever white should have done, he shouldn't have done that. Because it's taken away every single chance on the queen side that he ever had. He's blocked up the queen side. It's clear now he's trying to steer this game towards a draw. I just think that takes away all of white's options. Having said that, you know, what should white do? Well, you know, I think actually he should be looking at a move like f3. I mean, I don't know how good or bad that is, but it certainly keeps the options open. For white, I'm not sure that queen g5 is particularly significant, a move like that. White can play bishop f4, and he's threatening to leave open the game with f takes e4. I mean, basically, I think it's the type of position where white can't really do nothing. He's got to do something, or his position will just get worse and worse. Well, Fuller's about a 2200 player. Just goes to show you, even master strength players don't necessarily understand the type of position I'm speaking of here, where your position imperceptibly gets worse if you find the wrong plan or you do absolutely nothing. So white blocks the queen side. This gives black a free hand on the king side, and Basin starts to improve his position now. He nudges the bishop back, he attacks the white queen, also bringing that light square bishop into play, and he doubles up on the f-file. So white has really taken all his chances away, and now black has a massive attack. Well, now white, funnily enough, starts to pick up the pace of the game. He starts to play really well. It's very strange. White seems to be changing gears throughout this game. He starts off quickly, then he slows down, then he seems to block the queen side and take all his play away. Then, finally, at the moment when he's looking into the abyss, you know, when black's attacking him with all these pieces, he picks up the pace of the game and goes into swindle mode, which is, as I said at the outset, the right approach in very bad positions or lost positions. So white, at the cost of 2 pawns initially, opens up the queen side. If black wants to win that second pawn, he's got to surrender the dark square bishop. But of course Basin is happy to do so because he's confident that at least one of these queenside pawns is going to win the game for him. White, meanwhile, thinks to himself, right, bishop comes to d6. But Basin has planned for this, and I'm pretty sure in this position he's intending to answer bishop takes f8 with the crushing move bishop f3, an intermediate move which threatens checkmate and really jams up the works. You see, the exchange, the extra exchange, the rook for the bishop is no good to white unless he can open up lines. Rooks are best on open files, and there are no open files in this position at all. White's got to try and create them. So f4 really is a noble attempt to save the king. E takes f3. Of course, it doesn't really solve white's problems in this position. He's still getting wiped off the park on the king side, really. It's now 3 pawns for the exchange, and black still has a withering attack. Nevertheless, white manages to concoct a really good swindle. So queen to d2, a5. If queen takes a5 in this position, we have, at the very least, queen takes e3. So rook comes to b2, a4. King goes to h1, f takes g2 check, queen takes g2, rook takes f1 check, queen takes f1, queen takes e3, and with the threat of bishop f2 imminent, it seems scarcely possible that white can save this position. You know, black has got, what, 4 pawns now and a bishop for the rook, and he seems to have this crushing threat of bishop f3. But now white looks around the position and he thinks to himself, right, I'm going to try and look for every last resource. And Fuller spots a really fine resource in this position. He plays rook f2. Now before we go on, I wonder if you can, after bishop g6, see what white was planning. If you can, consider yourself a champion swindler. Okay, well, Fuller exhibited all the qualities needed to be a good chess player in this position. He swindled Bassin out of a stone cold win. He went rook f8 check, king h7, queen f2, queen takes f2, and now rook h8 check. An incredible resource, which after king takes h8 results in a remarkable stalemate. Just going back to the position after king h7 and looking at it now, rook h8 check would not have done. It had to be queen f2. White can't do it this way round, because of course in this position it's not stalemate. He's still got king h2. So that was a remarkable finish. Let me just put the final position up on the board for you, where Black was probably left scratching his head. He thought to himself, how the heck did I not win that game? And it's true, you look at it and you think, well, it's amazing, how did he not win? Well, he didn't win because White was very resourceful. And let that be the final lesson of this little example to you. You're going to get lost positions in chess, and the thing is not to just sit there and lose them. You've got to make life difficult for the opponent. And the way to do this is to look for every last resource and to complicate. That's the only way out sometimes of the hole.